Okay, friends, it's time for a monthly wrap-up again, and I think this one is gonna be pretty big. Hello everyone, I'm Rosa, welcome. So we are doing my favorite video of the month, or actually I have a couple of favorite videos of the month now. Let's just say it's one of my favorite videos to record. And it is the monthly wrap-up. So last month, October, I read 14 books and I listened to one or read one audiobook. So we have a lot of pages, a lot of stories to go through, and I honestly feel like half of these books I read, I feel like I read them half a year ago. So we'll see how well I do summarizing what's going on in the books and if I can remember names and such. Spoiler alert, I can't anyway. But we should better get to it because we have a lot to go through. So let's get started. So this was October. It was spooky month, which means that, of course, most of the books that I'm going to talk about today are either horror books or books that have dark academia vibes or blood magic or, you know, just darker vibes, maybe dark romance. I just wanted the books to have a darker vibe, and a lot of them also fit with the Fameathon prompts. So I don't know if I can remember every prompt with the book, probably not, so we're just gonna ignore that. But let's get started. So the first book that I read was No One's Home by D.M. Pulley, which is a contemporary / historical fiction horror book with supernatural or paranormal vibes as well, paranormal elements. It is about a family that's moving into a house, an old house, somewhere in the US. And this house has a story. There's been a lot of tragedies in the house. I think 2 or 3 murders, it's said at the start of the book. I don't fully remember. I think it might be 2 murders. And throughout the book you kind of follow the house, actually. It's kind of told from the house point of view, as in you never leave the house. The way that it's written as well is kind of like this surveillance point of view. It's funny and different. Well, it's not funny. It's kind of spooky and different. It was my first ever horror book, so it spooked me out for the first I want to say 100 pages. Then I was fine, but I was spooked for a little bit. But I really enjoyed this book. It was cool to see something written in a different way. I really enjoyed it. I also really enjoyed actually visiting the different families because you got different stories to follow as well with the different families living in the house. I think you end up following a total of, it's 4 families, I think. Yeah, but that also causes some issues trying to remember names. I had to write them down, so I highly recommend, if you're considering going into this book, that you write down the names of the different families and then also the different family members, and also when they were living in the house, because it gets a little messy. It's a little bit hard to remember anyway. But I enjoyed it, so it was a 4 out of 5 for me. Definitely worth looking into if you like stories about haunted houses and such. I think it was cool. Then after that I read a supernatural romance, which was The Bargainer, or now that's what the series is called. Rhapsodic by Laura Thalassa, or Thalassa, I'm not really sure how to pronounce her name. But in Rhapsodic we follow Calypso, I think her name is, who is a siren who has made a deal with the Fae Prince? Yeah, the Fae Prince. Or more precisely, she has an arm full of beads, and every bead represents a deal that she's made with the Fae Prince. So these were made years ago. But suddenly the Fae Prince turns up in her house. I'm pretty sure he was lying on her bed, and it's it's time to pay up. I need those favors paid back. And you know, one thing leads to another. It's definitely a romance. I would say it's a new adult romance, not fully adult. Paranormal, we have magic as well, it's urban fantasy. I really enjoyed it. I was definitely in the mood for a romance at the time that I picked it up, so it was very pleasant. It was a good read for me. The characters were likable. I forgot what his name is. I really want to continue the series though, so I'm probably gonna do that at some point, maybe in December, maybe later this month, but I really enjoyed it, and a supernatural romance, what's not to enjoy? And what was his name? Oh right, I'm not supposed to tell you anyway. It's probably good that I don't remember his name. Yeah, because you're supposed to kind of learn it throughout. There's a thing with fairies and names, so it's fine. It's fine that I don't remember. But it was a 4 out of 5 for me. I'm looking forward to continuing the series, and I kind of want to try and read other stuff by the author as well. I know that she also wrote The Four Horsemen, so I might look into that. I don't know, those covers, if you guys have seen them, I'm not the biggest fan of 6-pack covers, so that's why I'm kind of But nonetheless, just the premise of them kind of sounds interesting, so might get into it. After that, I read the Shades of Magic trilogy. This had something to do with blood magic. Kel in this book, who is one of the two lead characters. We follow Kel and Lila mainly, and Kel is an Antari, which means that I should probably explain some of the world first before this makes sense. So this takes place in London, but not just London. It takes place in 3 different Londons. So we have Red London, where Kel lives. There is White London, and like Red London is thriving. There's a lot of magic. Magic is basically just like second nature in Red London. Then there is Grey London, which is where Lila lives. And Grey London does not have magic. It's just kind of like real London, I suppose, but like back in the days, I think. Something like that. How would I know? I don't know. Anyway, then there's White London, where magic is kind of taken over a little bit. It's hard to explain. Read the book, you'll understand. And once there was a 4th London as well, Black London, but we don't talk about her because something happened there. So you'll learn if you read the books. Kel, as an Antari though, can travel between the Londons using blood magic. While he is in one of the Londons, he is approached by a person who's like, can you take this from this London to the other London? And he doesn't really get a choice, so he has to, because Kel is also a smuggler, which is illegal. You know, anyway. And in the process, he also runs into Lila, who kind of, I almost dropped my phone, who kind of tricks him into making a deal with him so that he'll bring her with him. There's a lot going on there. This was such a good read. I loved this. This was my first book. Yeah, this was actually my first book by Schwab as well, and I was so captivated in the writing. This was such amazing. Yes, I loved this trilogy. Actually, it's not really a trilogy anymore. I think she's announced that she's writing 3 new books as well, so I suppose these 3 books are kind of wrapped up in this story. Like, this story is finished, but she's continuing with another trilogy within the same universe with the same characters. I'm looking forward to that. I think it's gonna be called Threads of Power or something. But this was so good. I love this. The characters, yes, not just Kel and Lila. You will love all the characters, I promise. Maybe not all of them, but close enough. So the first 2 books, A Darker Shade of Magic and also A Gathering of Shadows, were 4.5 for me, and then A Conjuring of Light, the 5th one, was a 5 out of 5 for me. I barely ever get 5 out of 5s because the books just have to make me feel like a certain way for me to do that, but it was so good. It was so good. And I also devoured these books. I read them so quickly, so, at least for me, because I don't have a lot of time to read. Actually, I just read quickly when I read, but these were so I've said that so many times by now. How many times can I say that? These were amazing. I can recommend. They are difficult to explain the genre for because technically, I mean, it's urban fantasy, but also historical fiction, but also, I would also say high fantasy, just in an urban setting. I don't know how to explain that. There's a little bit of romance, but it's not the center of the story. We have a lot of magic, like a lot of magic. There's adventure elements as well, obviously, with them, you know, adventure elements, just put it like that before I accidentally spoiled something. Happy vibes, jokes, sad vibes. Yes, amazing books. Highly, highly recommend. And also, I have the collector's editions and I love them because there's art on the end papers. Yes, I just love this trilogy, so anyway, this was such a high point of the month for me. Let's move on before I continue talking about them. After that, I had to read a horror book, just a straight up horror book, I think. So I ended up choosing House of Hollow by Krystal Sutherland. It's a young adult fantasy horror. I think that's it. Yeah, I would say that's it. We follow 3 sisters who, when they were younger, disappeared for 30 days to come back, and then with time their hair turned white, their eyes turned black. In present day, 2 of them are kind of, at least, or the oldest one is famous. She's a model, she has her own fashion brand. The middle one is, you know, living her life as well. She's a musician. She's a bit of an underground musician though, so she's not like famous like her older sister is, but I would say she's pretty out there still. And then we have, what is her name? Iris, who is the youngest one, and she just wants to go to school. But then one day, Gray, the oldest one, disappears. And it's up to Vivi and Iris, I think her name is Vivi? yes, it's up to Vivi and Iris to figure out what happened to Gray. And a lot of things are unraveled in this, or it's a bit of a mystery as well, I suppose. A lot of things are unraveled in their endeavor. I don't know if you can say it like that, but I'm gonna go with it. This was a really pleasant, I would say it was a really pleasant read. I enjoyed the way that it was written. It was really fast read as well. I think it's just 300 pages or just below 300 pages possibly. Beautiful story, or I don't know if beautiful is the right word to use. Bit gory maybe? Question mark. But I enjoyed it. It had been a while since I read anything with sisters. Not brothers, but sisters. It had been a while, so it was really nice to, as someone with 2 sisters. I'm actually the youngest, so yeah, no. I would also go on an adventure if my sisters disappeared. I am right there with her. I would do anything to find them. So it was nice to read a story about sisters as well, trying to save another sister. But definitely a bit of I want to say a bit of a gross vibes here and there. I'm not gonna say too much because I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, because I honestly think that you should read this if you're looking for a young adult horror book. This is very lovely, written in a very nice way as well, and my voice just kind of cracked. We're just gonna ignore that. I've been talking a lot today. And I highly recommend it. So it was a 4 out of 5 for me. Very pleasant read. Yes, go read it if you want to read young adult horror. Yep. After that, I went into a book with a gothic cover or a gothic setting or something. This is also a debut. It's by Lyndall Clipstone. It's called Lakesedge. It came out at the end of September, I believe, and it's a story about, the synopsis that I read was completely different from the story that I ended up reading, which was super weird, because the synopsis that I read was that our lead character, whose name I've unfortunately, Violetta, her name is Violetta, I didn't remember, but that she arrived at this gothic mansion and it's kind of known to be haunted and there's a lot of stuff going on there, and the owner is a monster who's just terrible to people, and one thing leads to another and she kind of finds out that maybe he's not. That was the synopsis that I read. Then I went into it without reading the synopsis in the book, because why would I do that when I've already read one? And it turns out it's not that. It's about a pair of siblings. We have Violetta and her younger brother, whose name I unfortunately don't remember, but her younger brother has powers that the lord of this house needs to stuff. Yeah. So he brings them to Violetta too, not just the brother. He brings them to this mansion that, yes, is rumored to be haunted because he's apparently also rumored to have killed his family and they're now haunting the house. And she does think he's a monster because he is rumored to be one. So the synopsis that I read did get those things right, but it's just like, they completely glanced over her brother. Where did the brother go? What happened? But yeah, I was having a bit of a hard time with this one, and I really don't want to be mean because it is a debut and I like the story, but I just didn't enjoy the way that it was written. It was a bit like choppy for me for some reason. Maybe it was just that I hadn't read a book from first person point of view for a while, or maybe it was just not vibing with me or something, but I was having a hard time with the writing style because it just felt like I did this, I did this, I did that, I did that. It's just kind of, you could make the sentences a little bit longer, that's okay. But I really enjoyed the story, other than the fact that the main character for the first like 40% of the book drove me nuts. I just wanted to like pull her and shake her and just be like, calm down. Like, you're making rash decisions, you're jumping to conclusions, and I do realize that that is something that some people do, but just like calm down a little bit, just chill, you know, just take a deep breath, chill. So me and her just did not get along, unfortunately. I gave it a 3.4 out of 5, so I'm still gonna read the next book because this is not a standalone. House of Hollow is, by the way, I forgot to say that, but this is not a standalone. So I'm still gonna read the next book once it's out. I want to know where the story goes, but hopefully with the last 60% she was fine, so hopefully in the next one she'll be better. And the writing style in me will vibe a little bit better too. We'll see. Anyway, Lakesedge by Lyndall Clipstone. Yep, moving on. After that, I read a middle grade horror book, which was Coraline. Coraline. Oh no, I did what I wasn't supposed to do. Caroline. Coraline. It's funny because her neighbors actually call her Caroline and she's like, I'm not Caroline, I'm Coraline. I'm Coraline. Anyway, so this book is, I'm pretty sure a lot of people know it because it's also been turned into a very popular movie that I have not watched, but I know that it's popular. A lot of people said that the movie was better than the book. Is someone screaming outside? Halloween is over. We're moving on. Okay. Drama maybe, I don't know. Anyway, Coraline. A lot of people said that the movie was actually better than the book. I wouldn't know, but I'm just gonna share that with you in case you wanted to know. So Coraline is about a girl and her parents who just move into a new apartment complex, I think it is. Coraline kind of feels a little bit overseen by her parents, so she's bored one day and decides to go on an adventure. And while being on this adventure, or just like looking around the apartment basically, that's her adventure. Anyway, she comes across a door, which the day before had just been a brick wall when she tried to open it, but this time there's an opening, so she goes through it and enters into an identical apartment to the one that they just moved into. However, in this apartment, the parents are a little bit nicer, the food tastes a little bit better, but something just feels off. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. So you guys are gonna have to read it. I really enjoyed the story. I felt like it was very whimsical. Of course, also a little bit spooky or spoopy, whatever you want to call it. And Coraline was such a likable character. She is, yep. Yes, I like her a lot. She thinks for herself, and that is a trait in a young girl that I like. I don't know if that makes any sense. Anyway, I think she has brains, is what I'm trying to say. So I really enjoyed this one. I actually really want to try and watch the movie now, but we'll see if I get around to it, if I can find it somewhere. Because you know, with streaming sites, everything is split up everywhere. It's so difficult to keep track of which side this movie and that movie is on, so we'll see if I manage. But I really enjoyed it. Oh, and it's by Neil Gaiman or Gaiman. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. You'll see a pattern when it comes to names on this channel. Anyway, I gave it a 4 out of 5 because it was really enjoyable. Very short book as well. So if you're looking for, if you're looking for a short but spoopy middle grade read, definitely pick up Coraline. I can highly recommend. So yeah. And then I read, another debut actually. So I at first read Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco, and then after that I read Hunting Prince Dracula, also by Kerri Maniscalco. These are from the quartet Stalking Jack the Ripper. No, I did not read book 3 and 4 yet, but I will. Okay, I will. What are they called? Escaping Houdini and Capturing the Devil, I think. I'm pretty sure. So the second book is quite thick, so I'm just gonna hold this one up. Spare my hands a little bit. Anywho, I am not gonna sum up the second book because I don't want to spoil anything, but in this one, we follow Audrey Rose, who is from a nicer, takes place in London in the past time, by the way, so that's why this is gonna make sense, or that's how this is gonna make sense. But she's from a nicer family, and when you're from a nicer family in London in, is it 1870? 1888, certain things are expected from you, such as you being a good wife and listening to your husband and not being interested in forensics. But Audrey Rose just is. So she has taken an apprenticeship with her uncle, even though it's kind of, she's not really supposed to do that. But Audrey Rose just loves forensics. She loves cutting up dead bodies, to put it bluntly. That's her thing. That's fine. We all have different hobbies, Audrey. It's fine. But only dead ones. Don't worry, okay? Don't worry. And with this internship, she is pulled into the investigation of a string of murders happening in London, performed by, or however you say that, Jack the Ripper. And also she has to work along with Thomas Cresswell, who she doesn't really like, but we like him, so it's okay. And I think that's the main story for the first book. That's all I'm gonna say. Yeah. This was, I almost want to say gory, just kind of nasty sometimes, just kind of a little bit disgusting. So just be aware of that going into it. However, I really enjoyed it. I loved their banter so much. I loved seeing these two working together. Yes, this is young adult historical fiction. I don't know if I'd say there's fantasy in the first one, but maybe I'm gonna say fantasy. I don't really know. Romance, did I say that? Mystery. I feel like I'm just I forgot which genres I've said. Horror elements too. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this book, but it's lovely. It's funny because I feel like I've heard that from some people, they say that the first one is kind of slow compared to the others. I enjoyed the first one more than the second one, so I'm not sure. I don't know. I just had to take a break from this universe, or this version of our universe. After the second book, I felt I just need to move on to something else. So that's why I only read the first two, but I really enjoyed them. So if you've been kind of on the fence about these, but you're looking for a young adult mystery, I actually would recommend these. Just so you know, because I like them. I gave the first one a 4. Why are there grease stains on? Anyway, for 4.2 out of 5, and the second one a 4 out of 5. And I'll keep you guys updated on book 3 and book 4 when I read them at some point. We'll see when that time comes, because I have so many books I want to read. So we'll see, but these were lovely. And also, we also got some feminist vibes in here, obviously, with Audrey Rose just kind of... She's not like the other girls girl, that's never really stated, which I'm grateful for because I hate that whole thing. But she is a good example, if that makes sense. I don't know how to... I started that phrase and I'm not really sure how to finish it. I hope you know what I mean though. She's a nice example of why this whole women being, or not being unable to handle these situations, she's a good example of why that's just BS, basically. So yes, we got some feminist vibes in there too. So anyway, I think we're halfway through this now. Oh my gosh. I'm trying not to make this another 40-minute video, but you know, I talk too much. So after that, meanwhile, actually, I listened to Dracula by Bram Stoker, which is it's a classic. And I listened to it on audiobook, and I suck at listening to audiobooks. Like, I cannot, at some point 10 minutes into a listening session, it just goes in one ear and out the other. I just cannot. I just can't. I don't know what's going on with that, but I really just can't. Never been good at it. Listening to people, no. Anyway, maybe it's because I'm alone so much. I don't mean that in a sad way, by the way. I'm fine with it. But maybe it's just because I'm not used to actually listening to people. So that's for another day. Let's just move on. This book is about, oh gosh, I know what it's about. Give me a second. I want to preface? Yeah, I'm gonna go with that word. I don't know if it's correct. This by saying that this is written kind of following journal entries and also letters. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint the story per se, but basically we are in a city, I think it's called Whitby. Oh, it's just England. It's just England in general. See, I missed that completely. But basically, a real estate agent has traveled to Transylvania to talk to Count Dracula because Count Dracula wants to buy a house in London. We don't know who Count Dracula is, by the way. Just want to point that out. Nowadays we know he's a vampire, but they didn't know this back then. But then stuff starts to happen, such as there's a shipwreck, an unmanned shipwreck in Whitby. There's a young woman with bite marks on her neck, and Jonathan Harker, alright, he also makes a horrifying discovery while he's visiting Count Dracula in Transylvania. There's a fly in my office. It's been here for like a week. How does it survive? But it flies around my face the whole time. It's fine. Ignore the fly. Let's talk about Dracula. So you follow the story through journal entries and letters, like I said before, and it's very suspenseful. It can be a little bit confusing at times. Some of the characters kind of go off on rants. I like the first half of the book better than the second half, I think, because it was just more suspenseful than the second half. It's about this whole like discovering who Count Dracula is and figuring out what is going on with these different events, and yeah. But if you like classics and you like horror classics specifically, this is a must read, I feel. I mean, it's not like you have to read classics, but if you like horror, this is a good read to get into. Does that make sense? Or more specifically, maybe I should say, if you like vampires, you should read this. Or listen to it, depending on whether or not you're good at listening to audiobooks, because I'm having a hard time like summarizing a lot of it, because there was one of the characters who's not the annoying character. I do recognize that. For those of you who watch my vlogs, I recognize that she's not actually the annoying character. It's just that the voice actress who voiced her, I found her annoying to listen to. There's an annoying character in this book who's not a feminist. Yeah, Okay. And we got more of this like, oh, women can't handle this information sort of stuff going on in this book. But they also learn that it's not true. We need to be included too, so stop thinking that we can't handle stuff. Women give birth to people, or more specifically babies, so stop it. I'm pretty sure women can handle more than you men think, okay? Anyway, but it was very suspenseful. Obviously this is horror, mystery, classic, and I ended up giving it, I think, a 4 out of 5 because I did enjoy it. I feel like I would have had a hard time reading it, but I feel like I would have had a better time reading it, if that makes sense. Classics are always harder to get through than a lot of more newer books, so that's a given. But with me listening to an audiobook going through this book, I just was having a little bit of a hard time, so I've learned my lesson. I'm gonna read from now on. I'm just not gonna try. Well, maybe I'm gonna try again, but not with a classic, with something else. Then after that, I did technically 2 of these books I finished in November, but they were a part of my October TBR, so I'm just gonna include them anyway. And the last one I also finished in November, but again, a part of my October TBR, so. But I did a readathon where I ended up reading 3 books. I wanna say 2 of them horror books, or at least one of them a horror book. The other 2, we'll get to them. But the first one that I read was The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. This is a young adult horror fantasy, magic, maybe. What are you? Beautiful is what she is. But anyway, in this story you follow a girl who is an orphan. She also has 2 siblings, but I mean they're all orphans. And they live in a small village that is on the outskirts of a forest that is cursed by fairies. And this curse causes people who die to come back as skeletons, also known as bone houses. One day a guy comes to town and some things happen, which he kind of makes a deal with our lead girl, and they go on an adventure into the forest, into the mountains, to lift this curse because stuff happens. And a lot of secrets are unraveled, a lot of mysteries are solved, or a lot of unanswered questions are answered. Let's put it like that instead. There's a lot of talk about loss in this one, and I enjoyed it. It's very touching, not super horrifying, or horrifying, not super spooky, I would say, but it definitely does have horror vibes to it. And I, for some reason, just really vibed with the way that it was written. It was just pleasant to me for some reason. There was a nice balance between dialogue but also descriptions, despite the book not actually being that thick. I think it's just over 300 pages, or 350 maybe. It's about 340. So it's very packed, fast-paced, but there's a lot of good stuff in there, and it's written in a way that I personally liked. So I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5. And if you're looking for a young adult horror with magic, not fairies, but there's fairy magic in it, maybe pick up The Bone Houses, you know? Oh yeah, there's also romance in it, I forgot. Oops. A little bit of romance, but a lot of talk about loss, so. But a very enjoyable read nonetheless. Then after that, I read The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw, which is about a girl who lives in a village or town. Let's call it a town. By the beach. A beach town, yes. Where 200 years ago, 3 girls were drowned because people claimed they were witches. Unfortunately for the town, these 3 girls come back every summer to haunt them and kill young men as revenge. So maybe you should have thought about that before you drowned them. I don't know, it's just an idea. Anyway, so we follow our lead girl who is preparing for this event to take place, and we follow our lead guy who is new in town. And I'm gonna sum up the rest. Give me a second. There's kind of like a lot of who is it? Who is it? A lot of explanations here and there. I feel like it was done in a nice way. It did have moments where it was spooky, you know? I wouldn't say it's a horror book though. It's more like a young adult fantasy kind of mystery. Horror vibes, romance as well, definitely a lot of romance. Basically, these 2 characters are hiding secrets from each other, and I can't say anymore. I feel like I'm gonna phrase it in a way that's just gonna give everything away, so I'm just gonna leave it at that, okay? You're gonna have to take that synopsis for what it, or that summary for what it is, because I just don't want to spoil anything for you. I just really don't. I think I summarized it better in my 24-hour readathon video, but I can't do it better right now. So anyway, I enjoyed the way that this book was written, I feel. right? I'm pretty sure I did. There were just some things about the story that I did not fully, I want to say, agree with, that kind of knocked it down a little bit for me, and yeah, that kind of ruined it a little bit. I don't know, I don't want to get into it. Again, spoilers. So I'm gonna do my duty and not spoil it for you by just saying that I end up giving this a 3 out of 5 because of some things that happened that I just did not really fully vibe with, and that is okay. But I'm sure that others will like this a lot and have liked it a lot. It's just me and things that I just did not know. So that said, I liked the vibe a lot, the atmosphere throughout this book a lot. I liked the way that it was written as well, like I said before, and I liked the relationship too, so there is that. So I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5, and it's kind of, I would say, still worth reading because you might not disagree with the plot like I did. You might be okay with it. I don't know. So anyway, I don't want to get into it. I really don't want to spoil anything, so I'm just gonna move on. Yeah, let's move on. Okay. Then I read This Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which, oh my gosh, yes. Okay. So this book follows Alex, who has been through a traumatic experience. Oh yeah. I have not talked about trigger warnings throughout this book or throughout this video, but if you wanna, if anything, check up on trigger warnings for this bunch. Just in general, check up on trigger warnings because there's a lot, okay? For all the titles that we've talked about today. But this one, definitely do. This is an adult horror book, or adult fantasy, not horror. Well, horror vibes, mystery, urban fantasy, dark academia. There's a lot in this one, like a lot. But we follow Alex, who has been through a traumatic experience where she was the sole survivor. She then goes to Yale on a scholarship, a free ride. Unfortunately for her, because Alex does not agree with this very much, but her free ride also comes with responsibilities because she has been hired by this kind of a small group of people who keep an eye on the secret societies that are run by people in Yale, and these societies also deal with magic, forbidden magic. They have like different focuses, if you will. So there's, I just wanna, if you go into this book and you're confused like I was at the start, go to the end of the book because there's an index over the different houses, the different societies, and their focus of magic. And I did not know this I did not know this until I'd read the book. It's at the back, just so you know. Want to warn you because I was confused, but I'd also not really slept at that point. It was the third book I read in my 24-hour readathon. I was a little bit confused. Anywho, they delve in magic, forbidden magic, and suddenly there's a dead girl on campus, and Alex just can't let this go. She feels like she has to solve, like there's something telling her that she has to solve this murder. That's what this book is about, and it was really fascinating. Although confusing, but fascinating. I loved Alex the character as well. This is not a standalone, by the way, which I thought it was going into it, but it's not, which I'm thankful for because there are a lot of things that are unanswered in this book that I really need to know the answers to. I'm frustrated. So anyway, but this was a 4.5 out of 5 for me. There was just like a little bit, it might have been the confusion part that kind of took it down half a star, but I really, really enjoyed this. It is brutal at times, so yes, check up on trigger warnings, but loved Alex as a character, loved the story, loved this weird version of Yale too, so we'll definitely look up on this or check this out if you're looking for some dark academia vibes. Yeah, it's my first dark academia book as well, I think, so that was interesting, but it was just weird at times. I don't know, maybe I'm just slow. That could be it, to be honest. Who knows? Well, maybe you would. Slow people don't know that they're slow, do they? Anyway. And then the last book that I read was, or the last book that I finished from my October TBR, because I actually started this before the 24-hour readathon. I think I started it after Prince Dracula, but it was Empire the Vampire by J. Kristoff. This is an adult, is it high fantasy? I want to say high fantasy, even though on Goodreads it's marked as urban fantasy. I'm not really sure why that is, unless I've missed something, which at this point I wouldn't be surprised about. But we have vampires in this one, but evil vampires, like really, really evil vampires. So that was lovely. And blood. A lot of blood, a lot of gore, a lot of brutal stuff. Yep, a lot of brutal stuff. And I read this so slowly. It took me 10 days to read it because I was enjoying it so much. It was more like, it wasn't like I don't want to read this right now, I want to read something else. It was more like I want to make sure that I have enough time to get sucked into this story when I'm reading it because it's so good. Anywho, basically, in this book, we are in a world where for 27 years. The sun hasn't really risen, which is a lovely environment for vampires to live in, obviously, but not so much for humans. And we do have these protectors called Silver Saints, which Gabriel de Leon, who is the lead character of this book, he's one of those. He's half vampire, half human, but I'm not going to get into exactly what that means because I want you guys to learn that through the book. I'm just going to put that out there. At the time this book starts, by the way, he's also the last remaining Silver Saint. So he's basically humanity's last hope, if you will. But he's imprisoned by the vampires. So that sucks. However, that said, the book kind of it's written in a different way that I really enjoyed actually. So you kind of have two different timelines that you alternate between, but not like we have 40 pages in this timeline and then 50 pages in this timeline. You get sucked into one timeline before you have to swap over to the other one. And it makes sense where they swap. So it makes sense. In one timeline, we're kind of introduced to how he was sucked into this Silver Saint life and also his personal life. And then the other one, we are told about how, oh yeah, did I tell you? The two timelines are written down, by the way, because he's imprisoned and the vampires that he's imprisoned by want him to tell his story. So that's why it's told like this, because it's written down by a vampire that he's talking to, which you'll also notice throughout the two timelines. It's kind of funny. Sometimes you get a comment from the vampire or Gabriel. My camera just stopped recording, but sometimes you get a comment from either the vampire who's writing down, his name is Jean-Francois, or Gabriel, and it's just funny comments here and there, so just anyway. But in the other timeline, you follow Gabriel when he's 32. So in the first timeline, you start out when he's 15, the second one when he's 32, and it's about him finding the Holy Grail, which will help end Day's death. And Day's death is the fact that the sun stopped rising properly. So that's all I'm gonna say. This was amazing. I loved every bit of it. Every single bit. It's brutal AF, so just be aware of that. Look up on trigger warnings for this one too. If there are any books in this bunch that you really need to look up on trigger warnings for, it's 9000 and also Empire the Vampire. But it's also funny. Like, it was really humorous. Surprisingly, so many very creative insults in this book, but also very heartbreaking. It had a little bit of everything, and the story and the world, just amazing, which is also why I enjoyed it so much. This is a copy from Illumicrate, by the way. It's the most beautiful book that I'll probably ever own. These edges are amazing. I just wanted, if you were curious, I just wanted to explain. And also it has a golden spine as well, so. But this was so good. Just very brutal. Very brutal. A lot of characters to remember and a lot of characters to really like. I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5, which I said earlier in this video that I rarely do, but I enjoyed this one so much and it had everything. I was reading, I don't want to say that. Ooh, No, I don't want to say that. Yeah, I'm gonna be that annoying person. I would recommend this. And it was so refreshing as well to actually read about vampires being evil, because there's been so many books with vampires not being evil. I know that they're never necessarily good, but they're always kind of like one foot in good, one foot very gray zoned. Yeah, not so many books anymore where they're just straight up evil. And they are, I don't even feel like evil covers it in this book. They're worse than that. They're monstrous. So that was lovely to read about. That was a nice, I don't want to say fresh take, because vampires back in the day were evil. Back in the day, as if they existed. But you know what I mean. I've read Dracula, so you know what I mean. They used to be evil, and it was nice to see a book with that point of view. I'm not saying that it's wrong to have gray-zoned vampires, because I love those books too, but it was nice to read a book where they were straight up evil. And yeah, so this was a 5 out of 5, and that's also why I'm so happy that I have this copy, because it is beautiful. Anywho, but that was the end of my October wrap up. This video is probably gonna end up being way too long anyway. I did my best. I'm sorry. I'm gonna try to read fewer books in November. Hopefully the next video will turn out shorter. It won't, but I'll try. We'll see how it goes. So let me know if you've read any awesome books throughout October, something that you can recommend. I'm always taking recommendations. I have a lot of plans for videos for you guys as well that I'm looking forward to recording, and there should be a book shopping video coming up on Saturday if I can get it to work, the editing. So yeah, look, you have that to look forward to, maybe, if you want those kind of videos. If not, you know, it's up to you anyway. That's all I have for you today though. If you wanna check out any of these books, I'm gonna link them all in the description box down below, so you can always find links to the different books that I talk about in my videos there, just in case you did not know. And yeah, that's it. So if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and also if you want to hang out with me in the comments, or everyone in the comments, consider hitting the subscribe button as well. And that is all I got. So I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll be seeing you all in the next one. Bye!